Hey guys, it's Dave. It's been a minute since we talked about cheap and easy plants. I came up with 20 off the top of my head, winnowed it down to about 10. Might be a bonus plant in there, might be one we've already talked about, I'm not sure. But in some cases, these can be had for free. So I've got a very sophisticated system to present these to you. And I'm kidding, I'm just gonna randomly grab the first plant. I'll be right back with you. First up, let's talk about the Scindapsus exotica. This is just an extraordinarily beautiful plant. And while this isn't a care video, I will just say that I really had a struggle with this particular Scindapsus and all Scindapsus. I will never own another Scindapsus except for this one. And it was really quite a struggle to get it to this point. Not a care video, but I will say that when my wife asked me to put together a little plant stand in her really pretty dark reading room, like dark green painted walls with an east-facing window, I put this in there thinking I didn't really have anything to lose. If it died, it started flourishing. And it wasn't under like bright lights or in a bright window, but that really dim light, except for the morning sun, that's what's helped this plant really look its best. I would imagine this is one at this point post-lockdown that you could get for free on a Facebook group if you have something to trade, or if you ask if somebody has some cuttings they could spare. We have a pretty friendly group here in Iowa City. I think we're usually happy to share our good plants. This gets an absolutely positively highest recommendation for those silver blue leaf lovers out there. This is a fantastic looking plant. I'm glad that at least in this one example of Scindapsus, I've got it figured out and growing well, and it looks so wonderful in that room. Let's go ahead and keep up with the silver theme a little bit. This is a Syngonium macrophyllum frosted heart. I believe some people also list this as frosted ice or ice. At any rate, Syngonium macrophyllum. And this is a large, I mean not a large example, but a relatively full example of the plant. So this particular one wouldn't be too affordable. But I've seen prices of this one all over the map. But if you choose a small one, I think you're going to be able to get one that's not too expensive. You can own an easy to grow plant that is as beautiful as this in that genus of Syngonium without having to get the white butterfly, the really common ones. You'll have to look a little harder for this one. This one is the Three Kings, and it has the more typical lobed look, if that's what you prefer. I love it. I love the variety of these leaves and the variegation in those leaves. Every leaf comes out, looks a little bit different. It's always in the process of losing a couple leaves, putting a few on, so it never looks, necessarily perfect. But I think these are two really great choices, and this might have been a bonus plant because I just thought to add it. Back to our regularly scheduled. Frosted Heart is one that I don't usually let dry completely out. If you do, you will be treated to, there are some brown tips somewhere. You'll get that, no big deal. Hardly a deal breaker, that's for sure. This is another really beautiful plant that does not require a ton of light. So if you've got that east-facing window, this is in a northeast corner of my porch. There's an enormous tulip poplar out front. It does not get much direct sun in the morning. I mean, minutes. I'm talking about minutes. And it's doing just great. In the winter, it is at home with me at bedside because I love this plant. These are going to appeal to people who like trailing plants, like I do, or for people who want to have a massive example of this on a pole like Sydney Plant Guy does. Sydney Plant Guy has an absolutely gorgeous one of these growing up a moss pole. Huge pillowy leaves and it has this wider variegation. This is from Plant Haven, Toronto. This is a version a friend gave me some clippings of from a Lowe's plant, and you can see how it's got the minty variegation. There is no amount of light that will turn this plant into this plant. It just cannot happen. In identical conditions, this is how they look. So this is also in that reading room with that really low light. I wasn't sure how it would do. I've done nothing to this plant at all, and it was just a little snip of a thing, and it's done just great in there. So, and that's through a whole season. I did this last summer, so it survived all of the air conditioning and heating and the darkest days of winter with no additional grow lights at all. So good recommendation for a beginner plant, dirt cheap. This is one that can grow so fast you probably would have trouble paying for one at this point. But if you did go to a Lowe's and get one of these, you can get a pot for like $8. That looks really pretty good. Just, man, make sure you isolate and pest treat in advance with whatever your favorite thing is. I use my do-it-yourself spray that I've had a video on, but whatever you do, at least our Lowe's. Every time I go there, I see something that I would worry about. For me, this one I am going to put on a stake, not a moss pole, because I hate moss poles. I have not hidden that throughout my channels, and there goes 1, 2, 3 dislikes on my channel as I mentioned that. I don't care. I don't like them, and that's how it is. But I do want the larger leaves, and so I chopped up a little plant that I had and made this propagation recently. Did a kind of a semi-failed experiment with the camera anyway on a substrate challenge, and so I'm excited to grow this one up for sure. Going through some of these plants, there are so many that need to be repotted, and I'm like, do I just do it now after this? Do I edit? Do I do some of the other things in life? I don't know. Who has enough time to get everything done? Nobody does. Wouldn't be Sober Plant Guy if I didn't have at least 1 or 2 Hoya. This is verticillata. This plant is way too common for us Hoya snobs to talk about or appreciate. Well, not this Hoya snob. I love this plant. You will typically see this advertised as verticillata black margin. For those who care, black margin is not part of the name. Never has been, never will be. That is a descriptor of what this leaf can do, but it is not the name. This is verticillata, and only verticillata. That's it. I think 2 summers ago maybe, Trader Joe's had pots of these for $15. As I usually do, I bought this as just a cutting and grew this. I have taken cuttings from this. I've even done it fairly recently. It's a plant that sits in my cat room, former office, plant tent room, etc. I have it draped over a dresser like this, and one of my cats frequently sits on it. This is a tough plant. It does not need to be babied. It does not need humidity to grow well year-round. I feed it with MSU fertilizer, that one I have linked in my description, with every single watering all year round, and that's it. It gets no supplemental lighting, no supplemental humidity, as I said, and it just does its thing. Would it grow faster if I provided some of those things? I'm sure it would, but not every single plant can get the princess and the pea treatment here. They just cannot. This is Latifolia outer variegated. This is a cool plant, and this is the last pot I ever bought from Costa Farms. It was a beautiful looking pot. I took the chance on it. As per usual with Costa Farms, it was packed in pure cocoa coir. So the minute you, with no amendments at all, so if you water that, it just turns into like a 10-pound brick. I went to repot it, barely rooted. I mean, anyway, it's their standards. They ship them out how they ship them out. So A lot of it did not survive. But what's really cool about this plant, and by the way, I love this plant. This is bedside for me too, year-round. But they come out solid green, and they just keep expanding and expanding, and then they slowly put on that outer variegation. So it's really neat to watch that transformation. It's a plant I enjoy so very much. I've got it on quite a tall trellis, meaning I'm expecting good things out of this plant after it barely survived, and I mean almost none of that pot did survive, but what I was able to establish has grown really well in a relatively short period of time. I think I got this the dead of winter this year, I want to say, so probably like January. Perfect time in Iowa to go out and fetch a plant. But I couldn't say no to it. It was probably a mistake. I knew better, but I'm happy I have it now. It's another one that is really inexpensive now. A lot of people have it. It's something you may be able to get a cutting of for free. Okay, a note about free plants. I have tried to give away quite a few free plants on Facebook, and so many people will jump on it and I want it, and then they just ghost me. And so I'll have a list of 4 or 5 people. I'm next, I'm next. I stopped trying to give away plants over 2 years ago. It just was not worth my time. That's how poorly it went here in Iowa City at that point on that particular site. If I put a dollar tag on it, even if it was just $2 or $3, people would follow through. So it just, people who are willing to spend a few dollars on some cuttings would actually show up to my house and buy them. So the flip side of this is, don't be this person that asks for free cuttings and there's an outpouring of people willing to help, and then come back for second dips and then third, and you're enjoying so many new plants and you just want more to. Don't be that person. Grow the plants you were given for free and then have something to trade. Sermon over. There are not many ficus trees that I like, or ficus plants. Okay, there's one ficus plant I like, and that's the Benjamina. It has kind of a rough reputation of dropping leaves on a whim and being difficult to grow. I have not found that to be the case. It sits in a south window, but well back from it and almost off to the side. So it gets pretty good light, and about once a month I rotate it a complete halfway. So I don't do any quarter turns with it, and it's done well. It recuperated from being the most neglected plant in this house. It did not make the move from our old house that well. It was moved into a room that I had not done the restoration project on yet. It may have been forgotten. It may have been quite cold in that room. It may have been just basically sticks with some sad leaves on it. And then 2 years ago, I kind of took it seriously and cut it way back, put it in its permanent spot no matter how cold it gets in that room. You can get a starter Benjamina for 20 bucks or less. Now, it'll take a while to make a tree, but I think it's worth it. I personally am tired of seeing Monstera deliciosa as if that's the only big plant. And yes, it grows fast, but I actually find this more interesting, at least in my taste, because it has more texture. It shimmers more when you have the fan going, you know, it kind of does its thing. This plant brings me enormous joy, and unquestionably of the big plants, it's my favorite one. I really love this plant. It sits right behind me on the couch. When I take it to water it and clean the leaves, it just looks absolutely bare naked in there, even though there's a shelf full of Hoya in front of that window. No special care requirements other than that not letting it dry out. I feed it GT foliage focus every watering. In the summer months, that can be with added humidity of summer. It can be, you know, monthly. In the winter, it can actually be more often because the air is so dry that the pot dries out a little bit faster. So that's it. And again, a really lovely plant. I do know I've talked about the Rhaphidophora or Rhaphidophora tetrasperma before, I think in the It's Easy Being Green video. A plant that I love so much. This was from Steve's Leaves, a non-tissue cultured plant, meaning it just comes with the mature form leaf and grows it immediately. The tissue culture small plants that Lowe's was selling at one time take about a year to get uniform mature leaves. I just gave this one a big haircut. It's in water right now, so I'll try not to pour that all over. I'm going to switch this over to perlite in water, but it was getting late. We had family in yesterday, and then I had all these cuttings, and I always feel like at the end of the day, get home, it's like, oh no, all these cuttings to deal with, and these are just such nice beefy ones. Throw it in a container and put them in water and they'll root well. But as you may or may not know, I find growing in perlite grows stronger roots than water roots. That works for me. I'm always disappointed in water roots, so I don't do it anymore. I know many of you will have a different experience. We should all do what works for us. No question about that. But not anything required to grow this plant well. No plant skill, no green thumb. All you need is a reasonably bright window or grow light. Water it as it approaches getting dry. Do not overwater it. It will tend to go towards root rot if you do that. Probably a plant that would be safe to let dry out, which I do quite frequently actually, because the substrate is way too chunky, and obviously more towards the bottom there's more cocoa coir, but I went a little nuts on this one, so I have to water it every maybe 6 days. For me that works. I probably would I would rather err on that side, because when winters come I don't want pots to sit for a week and a half or 2 weeks and not need to be watered, because I used to lose so many plants when winter would come. It's hard to avoid losing any plants, but I would lose a ton. Now maybe I was less experienced, maybe I overwatered, you know, who knows, but I made some changes that have worked really well, and a perfect segue into the next plant. If what people really desired from me was a video about how to take one of my largest, most beautiful plants and reduce it into a shell of its former self, I would be well equipped for that. This is my Philodendron micans, and I will tell you friends, this is the comeback kid of 2024. This used to be a 7-foot trailing plant that was absolutely magnificent. Full, huge leaves for a trailing plant. Absolutely stunning. It was a plant I just couldn't shut up about, showing off, photographing, forcing my wife to make a comment every time I was watering it in the sink. And then this winter hit it really hard in January when it got down to -25 outside, like I've mentioned, and the room it was in got down into the 40s. And it would warm up during the day when I'd get the fireplace going and if the sun came out, but I think we went for a month without the sun, you know, properly coming out from behind the clouds. I could have moved it to a warmer room upstairs, but I had done that a couple years earlier with a bunch of plants when I had insulation work done. And they really suffered changing location in the winter into a much darker room. I don't think the heat, the warmth, offset the damage of those. I had a lot of plants suffer. So did I make the right choice? I don't know. Now that it's so small, I think, you know, maybe it would make that transition better. But this is another plant that is readily available. It's the only sort of suede plant, velvet plant I can grow, and almost almost unalived it completely, but just an underrated plant. It used to be pretty popular. Now it's cheap, And when you get these pinky hues in with the lighter green and the darker green, and then those really, really dark green leaves, be still my heart. I mean, this could definitely be the only philodendron I owned. And I hope the millennial plant dad is watching right now, because you'll note it's in my tried and true terracotta. He just did on his channel a show about why not to use terracotta, and I couldn't agree more with any of his points, even though I don't take his good advice. But this is another one that I would like to repot this week, if I can make some time for that. I would imagine that it could go into a smaller pot than this. Still 6 inches, but maybe narrower, maybe not, I don't know. Maybe I should just leave it alone because it's finally doing good. Let me grab one more plant and then we'll say goodbye for today. This is a propagation off one of our 2 decades old Scheffleras. So we have one in the living room and one in my small plant room, tent room, cat room. When I say cat room, they're not locked in there. There's just a little baby gate that the German Shepherd can't get through, so they have somewhere that they won't be herded constantly. But I took a little cutting of the one downstairs here, and it rooted up really, really nicely. Might have done a couple cuttings, it looks like here. And then I was going to give it to a friend. He got a new apartment, but it was really very, very dark. It had a small north window, so that wasn't going to work. And then I was going to give it to another friend at his house. That one didn't work out either, and I just keep it here in my east window. It is growing so beautifully. I don't need this, obviously. I have 2 great big plants. The 2 we have, did I say how old they are? They're 40 plus years old, so very old. My wife got them when she was in college, and they were already pretty established plants then. So very old plants. So durable, my God. The one I have in the living room is in a west window. It's getting too much light, but I keep the shear pulled. I don't know where else I could put a plant that large. I do cut it back regularly in the spring. The one that is upstairs had 2 long stems. They were just shooting off towards a window because the place we used to live at, it was just headed towards the only window in that room. It was unmanageable, it was ugly, and I got permission to just cut it all the way off down to the base stem. So there's one big base stem and then these 2 little shoots, and oh boy, it took off immediately and put off growth point after growth point after growth. I mean, it was crazy to watch it happen. I had it on the downstairs porch and just absolutely nuts. And it's a big, big plant right now. So I'll put that picture in for you. Doesn't really do it justice. It's obviously a plant you'd have to have a little bit of patience with. It's not going to grow as fast as a Monstera. But again, I find this more beautiful. I find it more interesting. And don't get me wrong, I do think the Monstera deliciosa is a beautiful plant, but I've seen enough. Everyone and their mother has one, and maybe that's how this one used to be too, but I don't see too many of these now that there aren't any more malls open, because it used to be kind of a common plant there because it grows so well. It requires almost nothing in terms of care. In theory, they're susceptible to scale. I can tell you that I have never once had a pest on the Scheffleras. I have a staghorn fern. Now that's a plant also susceptible to scale. That one actually has proven itself to be susceptible to scale, but all I do is clean these with my normal pest prevention thing. In fact, I did it just this morning. I took it outside, sprayed it down to keep the leaves clean, because it will, I mean, they sit sort of flat, so it will collect dust, but it's an A+ plant all the way. If you live in the Iowa City area, let me know, because I have a really nice one available. This was a fun one to make. I love common plants. Common plants are all throughout my house. They are the bread and butter of my permanent collection. Fun to talk about with you. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sure there'll be a third one because I've got plenty more common plants. I've got some viewer requested videos coming up and a really special one dedicated to Hoya in the near future. So I hope to see you in one or all of those real soon. Bye-bye.